We're thrilled to have you here. I'm Urvi and that's Shreyas. We're the founders of Eco Galaxy, which curates this stream Climate Conversations. And today, all of you are really helping us in our goal, which is to very sincerely mainstream these very critical, urgent, important conversations about the health of our planet and about the natural world. So thank you all for being here, and thank you for being a part of this workshop. Now, before I introduce our incredible speaker of this session who will be conducting the workshop, Eco Galaxy begins each session with this. It is an acknowledgement that this land on which we gather, where we are today, once belonged to our city's rocks, trees, insects, birds, and countless other living beings that are indigenous to this land. We acknowledge this in the spirit of solidarity and a respect for our shared existence on this planet. All right, our session this afternoon is titled Eco Tales Across Borders, and it is conducted by Priyadarshini Panchapakesan. She is a children's author, teacher, and storyteller. Her books, The Myth of the Wild Boar and The Guardians of the Forest, blend adventure with environmental themes, inspiring young readers to care for their homes. Her book celebrates the Western Ghats while addressing the challenges of deforestation, climate change, and tourism. Thank you very much for being here, Priyadarshini. The floor is yours.
I am from Kodaikanal, Tamil Nadu, India. I am an eco-fiction writer. I write children's books with regard to issues happening in Kodaikanal, such as deforestation, such as wildlife migration. And for me, it's really important to be here because a lot of eco-fiction writers, they write about very generic topics like pollution. I witnessed these changes. I witnessed how the wildlife was slowly moving away from the forests and entered into the town. I slowly witnessed how deforestation was impacting a land like Kodaikanal. So all of this is something I've really witnessed over the decades and years spent here. So I'm just sharing a little bit about what I do, and you'll get to know more about the work that I do through my workshop. My aim is also to do all of this through children's literature, because I think children's literature is a very important way in which we can connect to the younger audiences and tell them that a place like Kodaikanal is not just a tourist destination. It's so much more. The minute I ask anybody, have you ever seen Kodaikanal? Have you ever been to Kodaikanal? The only thing they say is, yes, it's a lovely tourist destination. It's a great place to hang out. It's a great place to relax. But beyond that, what else is Kodaikanal beyond that? What are the environmental issues in Kodaikanal? So I'm an author from a very small hill station, just trying to tell my story here and try to stand up for my community and the mountains as well. So, of course, I'm sure all of you have heard of where Kodaikanal is, because now it's become a very, very popular tourist destination. And the past year, we actually had to issue e-passes for people to drive up the Ghat road and experience the mountains. But again, we got an overwhelming number of e-passes. So many participants wanted to come up and see what Kodaikanal was all about, right? So, of course, so Kodaikanal is located here. It's in the Western Ghats. And for me, again, like I said, it's really important to share stories of where I come from, because these stories are not generic, they are specific, they're rooted in where I come from. They're rooted in the experiences that I have lived through. So I'm just going to share a little story with you. You can just sit back, relax, enjoy. This is a very short story from my book called The Myth of the Wild Boar. I'm sure all of you have heard what a wild boar is. It is also known as the Indian bison. We'll come to that in a bit. So this is a very short version of my story, which I would like to share with all of you. And once in a while, I might pause as well and ask you questions, ask you what you think. So I hope you enjoy my story. This is a little tale from Kodaikanal, from where I come from. So let's see how it goes. So my story, The Myth of the Wild Boar, is set in a fictional land, in a fictional mountain called Megham Mountain. Why do you think it's called Megham Mountain? What does Megham mean? Clouds, yes. And people who live on the mountains, we believe that we are surrounded by clouds. We believe that we're almost part of the heavens. That's how it feels like to be living on the mountains, right? So my fictional story, and of course it has a little bit of realism too, because all of these things are happening in Kodaikanal right now. right? It's called Megham Mountain. And if you see this image, every plant and every animal, they're connected with each other. So this place is a place of balance. It's a place where even if one thing falls apart, the whole mountain crashes. That's how I begin my story. I talk about the importance of all of these animals living, coexisting together. And of course, when we're talking about the Western Ghats, there's some very, very important, unique species there that exist nowhere else in the world. Some of these species are, of course, the Nilgiri tar, which is the state animal of Tamil Nadu. We have the Malabar giant squirrel. We have the Kurinji flowers, which bloom only once in 12 years. We, of course, have the very cute, very famous Nilgiri flycatcher with its beautiful blue coat. And we have the wild boar. All of these animals, all of these beings, they're very connected to each other. And even if one disappears, it really does impact the ecosystem, right? So, of course, all of this now looks very fascinating to us. But at the same time, my story is about conservation. What is happening to them? And why do we feel the need to really preserve these species? So in my magical place called Megham Mountain, all of these animals, all of these plants exist. And so does a little girl. Her name is Teni, and she belongs to the honey collector tribe. So if you know about Kodaikanal has, the oldest residents of Kodaikanal were actually the honey collectors, the tribal people, right? And you might have seen videos of people going up and collecting honey from the trees without any equipment, because they don't need equipment. They're used to it. They know the techniques of how to collect honey from the beehives, right? So my protagonist of the story is a little girl called Teni, who belongs to the honey collector tribe. And she's the one who drives the story forward. She's the one who brings everybody together to fight for the wild boar. The wild boar in Kodaikanal has been moving away from the forests into the town. This is what we've been witnessing for the past, especially 6 to 7 years. Now in Kodaikanal, the wild boar has almost become like a common cow. You know, people see it around all the time. The fascination is no longer there. Even tourists who come to Kodaikanal say, oh yes, I mean, isn't this just a normal cow that wanders around the street? But no, once upon a time, these animals only used to live in the forests. So yeah, so let's see how my story goes. In a forest school, and of course, the protagonist of the story, little Teni, a little girl from the honey collector tribe. She's the first of her tribe to get a formal education. She's sitting around in a beautiful a beautiful forest school with a lot of other kids around her. And she's the only one of her kind in that school. She's the only one from the honey collector tribe. And she listens as her teacher says a story. Her teacher is telling all of the kids a story about the majestic wild boar. The teacher says, the wild boars are very, very scary. Don't go near them. If you go too close to them, their breath can lick away human skin. Their tongue, if the tongue touches you, it can burn away your flesh. So the teacher is telling the kids a very, very scary story about the majestic wild boar. Now later on, we'll find out why the teacher says this story. But all the kids looking around and listening to the teacher's story are very fascinated by the wild boar. They're asking each other, is the wild boar really that scary? Is the wild boar, can it really burn away human flesh? Can it really, if it really breathes on us, can it melt away our skin? Why is our teacher saying it's such a scary being, right? And our little protagonist, the little girl from the honey collector tribe, she says, no, I don't think a wild boar is really that scary. I don't think Indian bisons can really burn away and melt away our flesh. But she also wonders, why could my teacher be saying this story? Why could my teacher be saying such a scary story about such a fascinating and majestic animal, right? So let's find out why, okay? And before we move on, how many of you have seen the Indian bison? Okay. How many of you have never seen the Indian bison? Right. So I just have a small activity for you where you'll be getting a piece of paper. It has a gore printed on it. And you can, especially for those of you who've never seen an Indian bison, I'm really fascinated to see what you think it looks like. Because one of the things that most people are confused about is how it might look like. And especially after what I've told you, the teacher was just telling all the kids there that it's a very scary animal, right? it can even burn away flesh, it can even melt away flesh, right? So the volunteer there is just passing on a paper. I just want you to think about it. And even those who have seen a wild boar, it's fine. Go ahead, creatively imagine what one could look like, right? And those of you who've never seen, I want you to just use your imagination, use your creativity. Think about what a wild goat could look like. Does it look like a cow? Does it just look like a bigger buffalo? What could it really look like? Is it really as scary as the teacher here in the story has said it to be, right? So use your imagination, draw, color. Yes. I'm really excited to see what you come up with. Yes, please don't use your cell phones. Please don't use your cell phones to see what a wild goat looks like. Use your imagination. Imagine. And remember, this teacher has just told all her kids that it can burn away human flesh. It can melt away human skin as well, just by its breath, by its tongue, right? So what do you think a wild goat looks like? So I'm going to give you around 5 minutes to do this quick activity. Use your imagination. A lot of you in the crowd said you've never seen a wild goat, so I'm really fascinated to see what you might come up with. Anything? So I've done this in the past, and I've got quite a few colorful wild goats, including rainbow-colored ones. So use your imagination and tell me what it might look like. There are also colors going around. So please. So does it exactly resemble a cow? Does it look like a bit like a buffalo? What does it look like? So I'm really, really curious to see what all you come up with. And if anyone is ready to show their artwork, please put it up and show me how it looks like. Wow, so she's got a wild goat that is peach in color. It's completely peach. That's very fascinating. At the back as well. So he's got one that's completely gray. He's got one that's peach again. Anything else? Any crazy wild goats with sparks flying out of their horns or, something like that? Anyone has drawn anything like that? Haven't finished? Red horns. So she's got one that's got red horns, right? So I think you can keep using your imagination a bit, but now I think it's time to reveal what a wild goat actually looks like. So I hope you're all ready. So that's how it actually looks like. I'm sure you would have come across it at some point of time. Now, what's really special about the wild goat is the fact that it looks very muscled. It has a lot of muscles. But what makes it really beautiful is that it has chocolate brown skin and it looks like it's wearing socks on all 4 of its legs. I'm not sure if you can see that here. And its legs up till its knees, it's snow white. So just look at that contrast of the chocolate brown skin over a tight muscled body and snow white legs up to the knees. So that's how beautiful this animal is. And my book, The Myth of the Wild Goat, is about this fascinating animal. And of course, to continue on with the story, with where I left off, right? A little school girl called Teni from the honey collector tribe. She's the first one to get education in her tribe. She's sitting around with all these other kids, and the teacher of that school is telling them a story, saying wild goats are scary. Wild goats can melt your skin away. Wild goats can burn your flesh. And Teni is a little skeptical. She's saying, no, I don't think they can, but my teacher might have a reason as to why she's telling me this story, right? That's where we left off. And Teni is thinking about wild goats, right? So because the teacher just told her the story, Teni is continuing to think about wild goats. She's thinking, are they really this bad? Are they really this scary, right? And Teni is walking home. Unlike all of us city people, Teni doesn't take the school bus home. She actually has to walk home through the forest, through different landscapes that we see in Kodaikanal. What you call the invasive eucalyptus trees, what you call the native shola forests. Teni goes through them all. She takes a long walk home. She lives deep in the forest because that's where her people live. That's where her community live. And as she's walking, she's thinking about the wild goats. She's thinking about these majestic beasts. And she's thinking, are they really as scary as my teacher told me? And as she's thinking, we'll soon see if she really sees a wild goat and what she does, right? So she stops. She sits on a tree stump and she thinks, I have 2 options with me. I can either go left. I can go by the lake and see maybe if a wild boar is there. Maybe I can really see whether they are as dangerous as my teacher tells me. Or I can take a ride, go home, and be comfortable at home. But what do you think Penny does? Do you think she's an adventurous girl and she goes towards the left? Yes, she goes to the lake and maybe she might spot a wild boar and maybe she might finally find out why her teacher told her all these scary stories, right? So she thinks, and let's see what happens next. Right. Suddenly, Penny hears a noise as she's walking towards the lake. She hears a sound of hooves running past her. And Penny thinks, oh my God, I took the wrong decision. Maybe I shouldn't have maybe I should have just gone back home. Maybe I shouldn't have wandered towards the lake, right? So she hears the sudden storm of hooves galloping across the grasslands. And now, of course, the landscape changes to the grasslands, and she quickly hides beneath the grass. And she wonders, will I really meet a wild boar now, right? And she thinks, she hears the sound of hooves very strongly, and she wonders, did I make a bad decision? But she quickly hides beneath the grass and she peeps through the grass to see who it could be. But what do you think based on the image? Do you really think they could be wild boars? Do you think she would meet them very soon? No? Okay, so let's find out who she really meets. Yes, she actually does not meet a wild boar yet. She meets the Nilgiri tar. Now, I don't know how many of you have ever witnessed a Nilgiri tar. How many of you have seen a Nilgiri tar? So especially when they are galloping across the grasslands and when the sunlight hits their skin, they turn golden. They look like, their skin turns golden. And they are they're really a beautiful sight to behold. So of course, the Nilgiri tar is the state animal of Tamil Nadu. And these are the animals I talk about in my book, because these are the animals that need to be spoken about. Again, everybody knows Kodaikanal as a tourist destination, but we don't talk about all these special animals and plants that really exist in the Western Ghats. But she sees the Nilgiri tar and she breathes a sigh of relief. She says, yes, I haven't seen the wild boar yet, and maybe I'm not ready to see one, right? But let's see what happens next. And then Teni finally goes and almost reaches the lake. But to her amazement, Teni went to see the wild boars. She went to really prove her teacher wrong. But as she was going to see the wild boars, she noticed something else. She noticed that the lake that was always near her house, the lake that she was so familiar with, the lake was completely dried up. There was not even a drop of water in the lake, right? So I'm ending my story here because I wanted to end it on a note of mystery. I'm not going to tell you what happened to the lake. I'm not going to tell you whether Teni really met a wild boar or not. But these are all questions of mystery. And the reason I wanted to share this little story with you, also to tell you that environmental fiction can be adventurous. Environmental fiction can be fun. It doesn't have to be boring. You know, the minute I tell people eco-fiction, I write eco-fiction, I'm an eco-fiction author, everybody responds by saying, oh, isn't that boring? Why don't you write romance stories? Why don't you write adventure stories? Why don't you write something fun? But for me, I always tell them eco-fiction can be fun as well. Eco-fiction can be interesting. Eco-fiction can be thrilling and mysterious and adventurous. And my book, The Myth of the Wild Boar, the reason why it's called The Myth of the Wild Boar is because I base my stories based on actual myths that I grew up with. In Kodaikanal, when I was growing up, the locals used to actually talk about how if you go too close to a wild boar, it can lick your skin away. Its breath can burn your flesh away. These are stories I grew up with. And I wanted to incorporate these in my own books to really bring out environmental awareness. And the story of Teni, we don't know what happens to her. We don't know if she sees a wild boar. We don't know why the lake has dried up. So all this leads to how stories can be, eco-fiction can also be mysterious. Eco-fiction can also be adventurous, right? But now we're moving on to the second half of my workshop, which is a more hands-on, practical kind of an activity that I wanted to do. So I showed you how I took my story forward with a lot of adventure, a lot of mystery, a little bit of myth from my own home. Similarly, all of you can also write eco-fiction stories which are interesting, which are appealing to people, which really, you know, which can really reach out to kids as well. So my activity for you next is to think about your own story. So just like how I said, I'm from Kodaikanal, I began with that, if you remember. For me, my stories from my own hometown matter a lot. Right. All of us talk about what Greta Thunberg does. All of us talk about what happens outside our own homes, our own countries, our own localities and neighborhoods. But we're very unaware when it comes to what happens in our own street, in our own city, in our own locality. We don't open our eyes to see what our immediate environmental issues are. And this small exercise is for you to reflect, is for you to think about what are the environmental issues I'm dealing with? What is happening on my street? Are the lakes disappearing in my neighborhood? Right? So this is just a small activity I want you to think about. So you can choose the first step. You can just use the back of the paper I've already provided you with. You know, the one that you beautifully illustrated using your imagination. So you can flip it over and you can brainstorm any one environmental issue that you think impacts your locality. It could be anything. It could be the fact that your streets are getting flooded every time there's monsoon. It could be waste management. It could be a bird that you used to see 10 years ago, but that has disappeared now. So what is one environmental issue that you can identify? So you can write that down. And step 2, all of us are very generic when it comes to environmental issues and environmental awareness. We all talk very generically about air pollution or ocean pollution, you know, all of that. But why does this issue matter to you? Why are you so passionate about it? The reason I'm standing here on the stage is because I'm very passionate about what I do. There aren't a lot of writers from Kodaikanal, from Kodaikanal who write eco-fiction, who write eco-literature, specifically on issues like the wild boar migration, like what happens to deforestation, how tourists impact a land like Kodaikanal. So why does your street or neighborhood or state matter to you? Why are you so passionate about this issue? So I'm going to give you 2 minutes to maybe, you know, figure out what really matters to you. What kind of an issue do you want to write about? So you can take a minute or two to jot down, just to brainstorm and write. Come on, I'm very excited to see what you all have to share. And this will also be a great exercise for us to know how much we know about our own locality. Do we know enough? Ready? All right. So do we have a volunteer to give a mic here, or can I just... Yeah. So there's a volunteer coming around with a mic. I'm really excited to see what all you have to say. Sir, please introduce yourself. What's your name?
My name is Gangadhar Pandey. I run an NGO for environmental awareness, and I'm based out of Hyderabad. So my point that I selected is single-use plastic.
Okay.
And what makes me so disturbing about this is 1 minute of comfort, centuries of trouble.
All right. But why does this matter so much to you, sir? I mean, why are you so passionate about this? Is there any reason for that?
I've come across personally so many deaths of biodiversity, animals, birds, water, aquatic life. So that disturbed me a lot.
All right. So you've seen how wildlife is, you have witnessed wildlife being disturbed by single-use plastic. So you've been very passionate about this.
And one more thing is I saw a video which says that there's a lot of microplastics in my own body.
Wow. Okay. So that makes you even more invested in this, right? Anyone else?
Yeah. Cancer.
All right. Anyone else who wants to share their unique? Yes.
Hi, I'm Triveni.
Hello. Hi, ma'am.
I'm Triveni. So my hometown is Karnool, but my grandmother's hometown is Anandpur. When I go to the Anandpur, when I saw from the bus window, I saw so many huge hills with filled with so many huge trees. I love that scenery. But since last 5 years, the hill there are no more hills. I mean, what happening? Digging is happening.
Mining.
So they are like my friends. I feel like friends. Friends from my childhood, have so much connection with them, but I feel very sorrow when I saw Anandpur nowadays. Why it is so matter for me? Because it is already drought area.
Yeah.
We have that name drought area, and one story is there. a huge rain is coming. Can I say in Telugu?
I
not
don't.
comfortable
Yeah,
with
yeah.
English, that's
I
why.
don't understand Telugu.
I can
Please go
express
ahead.
it in
Yeah, sure.
ఏమైందంటే తెలుగు డ్రాట్ ఏరియా అనమాట. వర్షం పడేదే తక్కువ. అట్లాంటప్పుడు ఒక్కసారి వర్షం పడి ఫుల్ ఇట్లా మంచిగా వర్షం పడి అంటే అతనికి ఒక పర్సన్కి వచ్చేసి ఆ వర్షాన్ని చూసి ఆనందం తట్టుకోలేక హార్ట్ అటాక్ వచ్చిందనమాట. సో అంత డ్రాట్ ఏరియా అనమాట. అలాంటిది ఇప్పుడు అక్కడ హిల్సే లేవు, అక్కడ వాటరే లేకపోతే హ్యూజ్ రెయిన్ పడినా కానీ అది వచ్చేసి ఫ్లడ్ అవుతుంది. వాటర్ లేకపోయినా అక్కడ వచ్చేసి డ్రాట్ అవుతుంది. సో మా చిల్డ్రన్స్కి మా ఇంట్లో మేమే 5 మెంబర్స్ ఉన్నాం అనమాట, చిల్డ్రన్ ఇట్లా మా రిలేటివ్స్. సో వాళ్ళకు వచ్చేసి వీ ఫీల్ వెరీ I mean we connected to that hills, but we are not seeing those hills completely.
Yeah. Thank you so much. And Urvi, how much time do we have?
We have another 12 minutes.
All right. So I think we can have maybe another 1 or 2 people speaking. Yeah.
मेरा नाम हमीदुल्लाह हसन है. मैं अहमदिया मुस्लिम कम्युनिटी से ताल्लुक़ रखता हूँ और मैं अपना एक एक्सपीरियंस असल में शेयर करना चाहता हूँ इस हवाले से कि हम एक जगह गए थे. हमारे गोपाल दास जो मुंबई में हैं, वो श्री कृष्णा मठ के जो है वो उनसे मुलाकात हुई. तो एक छोटी सी बात उन्होंने बताई प्लास्टिक के हवाले से, और हम लोग घर में इस चीज़ को करते हैं एक्सपीरियंस. तो अगर छोटी चीज़ें भी हम लोग इसका ख्याल रखा जाए तो हम बहुत जो है मददगार बन सकते हैं अपने एनवायरनमेंट को बचाने के लिए. तो उन्होंने बताया कि आमतौर पर होता क्या है, हम दूध का पैकेट लाते हैं घर पे और उसका किनारा काट देते हैं और दूध डाल देते हैं. तो हम ख्याल रखते हैं उस बड़े पाउच का कि उसको डिस्पोज किया जाए, मगर वो जो छोटा सा टुकड़ा ज़मीन पे पड़ा रहता है उधर इधर, हम उसका ख्याल नहीं रखते हैं. तो उसका अगर बजाय हम काटने के फाड़ देते हैं तो वो दूध जो है पूरा निकल जाएगा और पूरा का पूरा डिस्पोज हो जाएगा. तो इस तरह हमें छोटी चीज़ों का ध्यान रखना चाहिए अपने इन्वायरमेंट को बचाने के लिए. तो मैं ये बात जो है यहाँ शेयर करना चाहता था.
Thank you so much for sharing that.
And we had 3 different languages in the same.
Yes, that was lovely.
We had, sorry. We take some more?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. She'd like to share her art. Yeah.
Wow, that's wonderful.
Can we come back?
You can tell people that. Can you stand? What's the issue you have faced then? What's your name? First tell us.
Zara.
Zara. And what's the issue you have faced? What did you write down? Tell everyone. What's the
Near my school, plastic is burnt because it causes difficulty breathing. Finish.
Thank you, Zara. Let's give her a round of applause, please.
I wish our political class spoke like Zara.
Hi, I'm Shivakrishna. I'm a student at University of Hyderabad. So my issue is about the taller and tallest buildings.
Yeah.
So as someone who enjoys sunsets and viewpoints a lot, I would really enjoy waiting till the sun goes completely down and maybe sleep in the night over there itself. But maybe I feel the tall buildings or whatsoever, they come over the sun before even the sun goes down, and that kind of matters to me a lot.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I would just like to say something before we continue. A lot of you, the reason why I asked you to pick up issues that you are passionate about is, of course, I'm coming back to this. Whenever we're talking about environmental issues, we have very generic ideas of global warming, climate change, deforestation, ozone layer depletion. But we often refuse to, acknowledge what is happening in our own street, our own locality. And, this activity has been very fruitful because it made us think, it made us realize that we have to look at and focus on our immediate concerns, right? Because that is what makes a difference. If I'm not there sharing stories about Kodaikanal, about the wild boar migration, about what happens when tourists come to Kodaikanal, I don't know who else would. So there, I feel like I'm really making a difference. And each of you have a responsibility and a privilege as well to share your own stories, which no one else can. So I just wanted to emphasize that again. And I think we can take
hope, but I just laughed at myself when you told eco-fiction. I think this entire thought of having a sustainable lifestyle where we have concrete as well as greenery in balance literally is a fiction right now, because to be able to have that is a luxury. So I've been working on this project, and I myself have went and tried to see where the problem is and all of this, but apparently a collective or stronger coordination between people is very much needed.
Absolutely.
So maybe I just hope I don't leave it to be a fiction, or I just don't write it to be a story. Rather, I make it a reality, one or the other.
Yes. So I think, do we have, please go ahead.
Yeah, I'll
Yeah,
just
sure.
Since you mentioned neighborhood,
Yes.
in my neighborhood, we have a Durgam Cheruvu lake.
Yeah.
So at one point of time, it was feeding drinking water to the erstwhile capital of Hyderabad, is what I believe.
Okay.
And today the state it's in a very bad this thing. Though the outside periphery has been improved thanks to some of the CSR donors. People go there, walk around, and that's all fine. But the core area, the lake itself is highly polluted.
Yeah.
So one is sad to see the dying fish. I've seen with my own eyes, fish floating and dying because of the depleting BOD. Then the other thing what ails is the sewage, whatever the STP is available is not functioning properly. And the number of sewage STPs are not sufficient. We have to increase the number. And more importantly, many of the outlet points in the surroundings are not connected to the sewage system. There's no point in having a sewage system, however effective it is, unless it's properly connected as per the needs of the topography and the geography. And again, there's a need to mark the buffer zone around the things. The whole idea is to remove the encroachments to the extent possible without, of course, so there is a very sensitive issue. And what is it I have done? That's the question.
Yeah, that's a very wonderful question.
Whenever I have volunteered my services, though I am retired, I've gone there at least on 2 occasions. I have joined the younger crowd. Maybe it's a message to all, to just wherever your neighborhood is there, please try to volunteer and put on your gloves and start picking up whatever is there. And there's a solution, and there are some short-term solutions are there, like creating some floating wetlands and all, which is being done by some of the wonderful environmentalists. But the whole thing, the lesson here is it has to be a combined collaborative effort at all levels.
Absolutely.
That's all I can say.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I'm going to wrap it up now. I'm just going to leave you with a couple of thoughts. So of course, for me, the way I communicate my issues is through children's literature, through children's books. And of course, coming back to the point, I only talk about, all my books are very rooted to my life and my stories in Kodaikanal. Similar to that, I hope I was able to communicate with all of you a little bit about what I do and a little bit about what you can do as well. Not all of us have the same kind of skill set to do the same thing or take up activism or be researchers, but we can all do our part to communicate our stories. And for me, to communicate stories about Kodaikanal, a small mountain in Tamil Nadu, is through eco-fiction, is through children's literature. So I hope I was able to make you think a little bit. And of course, eco-fiction is a blend of both fact and fiction. And that's why I asked you to focus on something that you are very, very passionate about. Because any good eco-fiction can only be possible if you truly believe in what you stand up for and what you write about. So that's it from my side. I hope I was able to give you a little idea or a little glimpse about how you can start your own eco-fiction journey and your own eco-fiction stories. So that's all from my side. Thank you. And I would really like to thank Ms. Urvi and Mr. Shreyas for having me here on stage. Thank you so much. Very grateful. Thank you all for having me.